Alright everybody, welcome to your 22nd AngularJS tutorial in which we'll be looking at something called digest in AngularJS. Now before watching this tutorial, I would recommend you to watch my previous one if you haven't. That is the Angular Watch tutorial, because we would be using some concepts of that in this one. So Angular Digest, just like Angular Watch watches over a variable update, Angular Digest basically creates the digest cycle which I was talking about in the last tutorial. So when you would call Angular Digest, what it would do is it would actually iterate over the watch, all the watch variables. So it will check if any one of them has been updated or not. And here I'm talking about the watches one, which watched over the variable. Well, that's confusing. Anyways, let's take a look at it with a simple example. Let's say I create a span tag, and let's say my random number, and down here give me a br, an input type button. Let's go to value of create new random number. That's it. So in the controller, what we do is that let's say I get scope dot my random number is equal to math dot random, and actually I forgot that it's math dot rand or random. Yep, it's random. Okay, so it's math dot random. Alright, so now what we are doing is we are just generating a random number, and we are assigning that to my random number, which would eventually appear in the span tag. Now digest, you would not actually need digest a lot of times, but it is usually required when you start hooking up with vanilla.js as well in your AngularJS tutorial. And for those folks who don't know what vanilla.js is, that is what is vanilla.js. Actually, it is just your plain JavaScript, but you know, we developers in a fancy way call the plain JavaScript as vanilla.js. Anyways, so the scope dot my random number is now holding a random value from math.random. Now what I want to do is I want to register a click event on this. Now I could even do that with ng click, and I would just type a function and I would create that in scope, and it would work like a charm. But for those who don't want to have the mainstream way, we have the JavaScript available. So what I'll do is I'll create document.querySelector input, since we only have one, dot add event click. Now let's say, okay, so I'll just create this function here only, function, and obviously even bubbling should be false. So here what I'm doing is I'm registering a click event whenever this button right here is clicked, create a new random button. And obviously you know the purpose of this button, it would just create a new random button. And whenever this is clicked, a function is passed with scope so that we could actually access the scope inside here. And what we would do is we would first of all, let's just console log button clicked, and then we would make sure that we create a new random number for the user. Simple as that. But here's a problem. Now let me show you what the problem is. So here's our page. Let's reload this. So you see that we have got a nice little random number here. Let's create on this button. So you see that we got button clicked, button clicked, button clicked, button click. But hey, why is the random number not updating? Well, the event is actually being called, the click one, but the random number is not updating. But why? Now the reason is this function, which is being attached as an event listener, is not the part of Angular scope. So Angular's digest cycle doesn't know when this scope is updated, because it's not a kind of loop, it's kind of a smart loop which checks for registered updates. So whenever you do something with Angular, the digest is automatically called by Angular for events like AJAX request or button clicks or anything similar. But when you are into VanillaJS, then what happens is that you are working separate from AngularJS, and AngularJS sometimes doesn't know that digest was required at this time. So to fix that, what we can do is we can make use of something called as digest. Now to do that, inside the click event only, what we'll do is this is the function here. So inside the click event, I'll write scope.digest. Now digest, yep. So scope.digest would actually check for any watch cycles, would actually iterate over the watch cycles and would trigger them. So let's take a look at it one more time. Let's reload this. Okay, so we have a random number. Let's click on random number. digest. Okay. Alright, so let me give it a check. Okay. I guess we should not pass the scope again because it's, I think, already available. Okay, so let's reload this page again. Let's see if it works. Okay, so this time it worked. So actually the error was I was passing the scope again inside this argument, which I shouldn't be. So now what's happening here is that if I remove this line again, what would happen, that even if the button is clicked and the property of the scope is updated, but remember guys that this property is not actually this span area. You're not actually working directly with the span area. Under the hood, what happens is whenever you are updating this scope, this runs a digest cycle and the watch cycle, and then only this area is updated. But inside a JavaScript event handler, Angular doesn't know that this is happening. So what it does is it does not run the digest cycle. So to run that, we make use of the scope.digest, and once we do it, we are good to go. So that's it for this video, and I hope you learned something new from this video lesson. And if you did, then don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you then next time. Thank you.